Okay, welcome back to our conversation on somatosensation, or the sensations that we have. And next on the list is the sense of smell or olfaction. And like the sense of taste, the sense of smell or olfaction is also responsive to the chemical stimuli. The olfactory receptor neurons are located in a small region within the superior nasal cavity. This region is referred to as the olfactory epithelium and contains bipolar sensory neurons. Each olfactory sensory neuron has dendrites that extend from the apical surface of the epithelium to the mucus lining the cavity. As airborne molecules are inhaled through the nose, they pass over the olfactory epithelium region and dissolve into the mucus. The odorant molecules bind to the proteins that keep them dissolved in the mucus and help transport them to the olfactory dendrites. The odorant protein complex binds to a receptor protein within the cell membrane of an olfactory dendrite. These receptors are G protein coupled and will produce a graded membrane potential in the olfactory neurons. The axon of an olfactory neuron extends from the basal surface of the epithelium through an olfactory foramen in the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone and into the brain. The group of axons called the olfactory tract connects to the olfactory bulb on the ventral surface of the frontal lobe. So if we can orient ourselves just a little bit, get my laser pointer. Oh, I gotta then zoom in here. What we have is the olfactory epithelium, which is kind of like at the roof of the nasal cavity. And so it's embedded into the mucus. You've got the nerve endings here, and those odorants will come in through the nasal cavity. They'll bind to the mucus and diffuse to the nerve endings here, which will then send it to the olfactory bulb there. From the olfactory bulb, the axons split to travel to several different brain regions. Some travel to the cerebrum, specifically to the primary olfactory cortex that is located in the inferior and medial areas that are associated with long-term memory and emotional responses. This is kind of how certain smells trigger emotional memories, such as the smell of food is associated with one's birthplace. Smell is the one sensory modality that actually does not synapse in the thalamus before connecting to the cerebral cortex as well. This intimate connection between the olfactory system and the cerebral cortex is one reason why smell can be such a potent trigger of memories and emotions. The nasal epithelium, including the olfactory cells, can be harmed by airborne toxic chemicals. Therefore, the olfactory neurons are regularly replaced within the nasal epithelium, after which the axons of new neurons must find their appropriate connections in the olfactory bulb. These new axons grow along the axons that are already in place in the cranial nerve. So what we have here is get the laser pointer out there, right? So previously we saw the roof of the nasal cavity, and that's where we're looking at here at the top here, where we have the bipolar neuron here that is the olfactory neuron, right? A certain smell or odorant will bind to it. It'll then diffuse down to the axon into this group of mitral cells. But the grouping there is called the glomeruli, or a ball of yarn. So these neurons will then kind of thread towards the glomeruli, where they're associated with the mitral cells, and ultimately they'll find their way to the olfactory cortex, to the surface of the brain. One of the few that doesn't go to the thalamus specifically. So you can see the olfactory receptors, that is the first cranial nerve. Those axons synapse at the glomeruli in the olfactory bulb. the olfactory tract, and ultimately to the olfactory cortex. The thalamus, then the frontal cortex for the sense of perception. Humans also have a pathway associated with the limbic system and motions, and from the thalamus to the amygdala, where it goes to the hypothalamus. It is really strong in the perception of our emotions. And so, again, the number one here is the olfactory bulb containing the mitral cells. Number two is the information received from the olfactory cells. There's kind of like the glomeruli, right? Where the olfactory bipolar neuron cells will associate with the mitral cells. Number three is, in fact, the olfactory cells, which pass through the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. And number four is the nasal passage or cat passageway itself. And five is the ethmoid bone or the bone associated with it. And so the pathway is that of the first cranial nerve. So from the olfactory nerves to the olfactory bulb, where they will move towards the, some of them will move to the hypothalamus and to the brainstem. Others will move towards the olfactory cortex, located in the temporal lobe, as well as the hippocampus and amygdala for their memory and emotional responses.